Okay, hi. I have a very practical question. Actually, it's quite similar to the first question you got. And let me relate to your example from your talk. Say that I have an online bookstore. I'm selling books and making recommendations for my customers. And I collect some data. Let's say that this is like a basic data collected, same for every customer, nothing special, nothing that I shouldn't collect. And
statistics or more statistics or for the person.
Like the basic stuff, nothing fancy. Let's say this part is okay? And say that you didn't give me consent for profiling you. And I have my machine learning algorithm that makes some kind of recommendations for customers. And now, does this mean that I should exclude your data from the algorithm so that it doesn't learn on your data? Or maybe I could use your data in the algorithm so it learns on the data of all the customers, but I don't make predictions for you and I don't give you the recommendations. Because in the second case, the algorithm may be more efficient because I have like more data. So I would prefer if I just didn't make the recommendations for you. But it's a similar case as in the first question.
I will make your question even more complex. Because it may be good for everybody that not those who are privacy aware drop out of your statistics or your recommendations, or the algorithm will be biased in the non-privacy people or way of thinking way. So we had something to optimize the ways in the street, and people who deactivated their Bluetooth were not counted. Meaning those who are poor don't have Bluetooth. Those who are privacy aware don't activate Bluetooth there, perhaps, or security people. And so where they lived, it was not counted. So I think this is this was a public service thing. The public service must not use such a thing which may discriminate people, even if they don't know which parts, and they cannot extrapolate because they don't know the reason behind. I have a solution for your thing. This is in paragraph 6, and there's Article 6, that you may use it for different purposes if the risk is mitigated and there is an existence of appropriate safeguards which may include encryption or pseudonymization. So it's clear that the data you take cannot get back to me individually but count in your system. This may be all right. But if you base that on my consent, then you must not use this data. So you can only use thinking of you only want statistics from your information, but never store then in the other thing which for the algorithm I've bought this specific book, something like that. But if it's aggregated already, then we are still within all this data protection by design things, but the pseudonymization would be sufficient, meaning also you don't know anymore why is this information part of your algorithm. And the Article 6, paragraph 4.
Thank you.
And it's in big exception. It's not totally clear how far it goes. You have to tell them if it's pseudonymized because it's personal, yes. So, but it can be not an individual telling, but the general information. And it's according then to Article 13.
Yeah. What is the next topic or issues that the data regulator are planned to work, or what they should work, by your opinion?
So the regulators, so e-privacy regulation will come next year probably, and this is more important now than the GDPR probably, because it's everything with internet, not only data, not only personal data, and it will also, at least in the planning, affect the developers as far as its browser or other processing facilities. It's not totally clear how far it goes, but they're working on that, and I hope for a good outcome.
And what about like machine learning bias and fairness? Like this is
yes.
really on the horizon?
And this is,
or?
No, and this is something where it's not totally clear how much it should be regulated. So there will be work, or there had started on the Commission side already with 50 whatever people, quite well, a set of many interesting people dealing with that. And there will be 2 things happening in Germany as well with some specialists. And right now the first proposals are made. Should there be an algorithm check or so? What about, should some be built in a specific way that they can be examined more easily? Is it something where it's totally free because there's no personal data anyhow? So, or perhaps if it's a public good thing, then it does not matter whether it's personal data or not. So if the bridge stability is tested, it should work as well, right? And this is happening as well. And I think it's very important, and it's because the GDPR does not say much about that, and it addresses specifically your crew.
Okay, thank you very much for the talk. I have a question. I'm interested in your position or a data protection position in abstract data. If, for example, I have an unusual name and it gets included into a data model. For example, a company scrapes the web, finds my website, and my unusual name lands in a model. And it pops up at some point in some synthetical data, for example, or in other contexts. Is that protected in any way? If I do this as a company, should I be aware that I have to acknowledge all the people with the names in my models?
So
okay?
I don't have in Germany a common first name, but a common last name in North Germany. But even in my region, there are 3 Marit Hansens. And the third one I know of, the third one is born on 24th of May. I only found out recently, because of self-Googling, of course. Meaning it's not a company decision, it's a personal decision. And so it can happen, of course. So if a person with the same name as you have always pops up because it's a model person or a real person, you are not protected because it's not your data. But if it's linked to your data because people assume you are the criminal one from the model, for example, then you may suffer some risks or some damages. And this means it depends probably on the model and how it will work. If it's only something where you have a very long name and it's being tested how the system works with long names, then probably it will never be published. But if it's something where your personality is always bound together with this artificial name, it would have been better for the company not to have used it. But if they are like there's also some literature, an investigation mystery or story or so where I'm a detective, or not me myself also, but my name is there and I think I'm a good person. I don't know, I haven't read that. But sometimes this is something where people think this is the same person, and the authors have not asked, they have not checked probably, and they don't know about people who get born. So this means I prefer something where if it's not for artificial data, that it's better that it's clearly not a real person, so that you've put in a number within or so. Then it's totally clear this is a made-up thing, because you never can exclude for the future that there are others. So even if they look into all sources and try to be, aware of what they are doing. And of course, they will also mimic some situations which may be linked then to your real name. But this means it's a recommendation. They did not do anything wrong because they never use your name. They never said they mean you, and there may be thousands of your name. They don't know. And if Google or whatever puts always together that, then you have the right to be forgotten. Because it's not you, but that it's clear that this must not come for your name because it's not you.
I wonder, what is your opinion about databases that were designed in a way to not ever or to never delete data? Mm-hmm. And they have already PII data, personal identifiable information. So it's very costly to overwrite this data, mm-hmm. and the data that is there can be used to identify someone. So what's your opinion on this?
Start at the beginning if you design the system. So it's an archive system, then it's probably necessary. And if they're personal, like we have something for our governmental authorities, and it's always public. And some people later, 10 years later, argue, now I don't want that to be public anymore, but they've not the right to destroy it. It's in the archive. It's a different legal baseline, but it's not something which is really embarrassing. It was public, it's still public. But if you set up a system like we send emails, an email archive system of your company, an email archive is not the same as an archive of a state. So some, I think that DAX or some others demand that you have, or your company may demand that it's a totally accurate version, like with blockchain, that each set of data is linked to the others. Then you cannot delete anything unless you rebuild everything from scratch. Yeah. But this means you must not use such a system if you know that you have to adhere to rights to rectification, correction. This might be possible, or to deletion. So if it's a normal email thing, the data protection by design would mean there's not this kind of archive. There are different kinds of blockchain, by the way, that can manage that.
Yeah. But I wonder, from now on, okay.
Yeah. But for the past...
if it's in blockchain is a very good example, I guess, and it's already there, stored. If you want to change it, the whole purpose of the system doesn't exist anymore, right?
But there are other types of blockchains that have a centralized...
Yeah.
And
but
so
if you already have a business...
So for example, for the accounting system, I totally agree that must not be manipulated, right? Even if it was a wrong accounting transaction, then this has to be corrected, yes, but this would be a booking back feature, something like that. But if it's something like... what's your name, and you are a criminal, and this is now sealed there, and what can you do then? You may need a new identity. Is this now the cheaper solutions? But so the risk has to be taken into account, and even 20 years before, it was clear that you should not use such a system for something like we had something on that were called write once, read many or so, the CD thing in the 90s. And they wanted the first e-files, so not paper anymore. And they put everything there in the order how they came in the pages. And we said, in the 90s, you have to be able to delete those pages that are together in the same file. And otherwise, this means, of course, if they are scattered on several of these worms, then you have to take all and rebuild the system that was not as complicated as blockchain, okay? And you have to make sure that that you know that this effort may be necessary. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it depends on the risk. If it's only something,
no excuses.
If it's somebody who only wants to challenge the system, it's no sensitive information, and there's no real risk. But somebody only wants to be a pain in the ass. Then probably he would not. But if it's a right and it's really sensitive information, then you must not build the system in that way.
Kind of related to that, specific to blockchain, I've heard that even if you keep your data off the chain, which is what you're suggesting, to have the centralized part, to have the data not on the chain, not public, I've heard that the public key of the individuals counts as
personal data. Right.
So in that case, what do you do? Like, whole Europe is not supposed to use blockchain?
No. No, but I said with transactions is a good thing. With archives, it's a good thing. But what are the things where where it may be necessary that data is removed, at least with effect for the future? If this is something because it's something where it never should have been on the blockchain, but it could not be prevented or so. So. Is this a state secret? I'm pretty sure that for a state secret, the full thing would be different. But for transactions, so the financial transactions where it was original, or for archives, I don't see the point then, because
let's say health data.
Health data, yeah. Then we really have to make sure that if it's an identifier, that for example, then the identity change of the other side may be the simpler solution. So who decides that this is your identifier? In fact, we have a system for a passport, so for refugees' passport things, where they voted for, right now it's only a demonstrator, they voted for different identities for different, not only people, but also in different situations. And this means that the identity change is so easy. It's not your name there, I think it's only a hash of some value, and the value can be changed. And so then you have another point of solving that, but it's not as simple. So this is another thing that you can use blockchain, but it has to be clear that even those personal data then can be skipped or can be uncut or unlinked.
Next question. You mentioned that only the data needed for the business model has to be stored and not more.
For the purpose it is, yeah.
Who decides what's needed? Because let's say I have a personalized recommendation system. One side of the spectrum is that I use your IP address that I know right now. I don't even have to store it, and I can already personalize my website for you. The other side is that I can convince people that I need everything about you to have a recommendation. Who decides what's the line there?
So this is again something which is an old question, several decades old, meaning the person who sets up the system argues, so the controller, we think this is necessary and this makes sense. And then a person may send a complaint saying, no, I don't believe that, you don't need this information. And then you say, no, we thought of your issue, but you see, we need it because. And so if you can really argue that it's necessary, then it is probably necessary. There might be the courts, the judges, to say, no, you made up this argumentation. But of course, the question is, how much may you couple for your purpose? Is the purpose now something you can use when I only serve those who disclose everything? So I need your shoe size for my bank because there's a different model if you have very large feet or so. Then it may make sense on the objective way, but the coupling may not be allowed. But this is something about expectations and about perhaps other kinds of shitstorms you may suffer.
I think you mentioned something like if a company does profiling on you, it needs to explain in a way how they do it. Maybe
the logic you mean, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So my question is about the Schufa.
Schufa is the one who won the court case that they did not need to, but it was on the former system, our Federal Data Protection Act. They argued as a trade secret, and they were not obliged to give out the algorithms or the much more information on the logic. So they did not comply to what people read now from the GDPR text. So many people say, the GDPR now demands they have to disclose more, but the wording is the same or very similar in the old version. So this will probably be the next court ruling.
Okay, and
because
it will
trade
probably go
secrets,
in the same sense, in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the wording has not changed, it will probably go in the same direction.
But it's now a European thing where probably they will go to the European Court of Justice. They did not before. And they probably are trying to get very good cases where it's easier for the judges. We'll see. But at least for right now, so the court ruling is 5 years old or so. Right now, I think the judges have understood that the algorithms are much more important. And now the question is, it probably has to be disclosed, but to whom? Is it really necessary that the person gets this information, or is it only for the risk treatment, and then there might be other, like the supervisory authorities, who get information? But this is so abstract on the GDPR perspective. The Federal Data Protection Act has a little bit more specialties there, like that your location of living may not be the most important factor, something like that. So it's I think only in Germany, and also that there should be a mathematical statistical report auditing your algorithm, that it's kind of interim possibility to prove that it's okay. But it's whenever you do prediction, how to prove that it's really necessary. It's an open question because even if we get those reports, how to judge? Necessity is easier than algorithms.
Thanks for your talk. One question. I have a very small online shop, and I try to be very lean on data. So I do store tracking data, but it's not related to any identifiable people. I just want to see how they're using the website. Also, I store transaction data, of course. but now maybe after your talk, I have to change something because I only should keep the invoices, but not the actual transactions.
Of course, I can tell my my idea on that, but probably you should talk to your regulator,
Yes.
and that's probably not me.
Yeah. So let's say
He's not from Schleswig-Holstein.
Let's say I take care of these things.
Yeah.
And now, are there any additional steps I have to do, like documentation, or I would be interested in that.
Yes, documentation.
What kind?
You had a small question, yeah, a small
Just to,
answer.
like document risk.
Okay, so first of all, Article 30 is you have to document all your processing, but it's very, very few information you have to document. You should have a security concept, and this should take into account all the risks. If it's not specific on sensitive data, no political, sexual, medical, whatever, then you probably don't need a data protection impact assessment. But perhaps if you are hiring, perhaps people who claim no, you are not hiring. Okay. There might be something where people tell you more and how to deal with the data, but probably your documentation effort is what you want to know about yourself anyway. So where's your data? What about the contracts with your processors? Are there any? Probably yes. Probably you don't do everything on your own. Do they behave according to the GDPR? And then they should give you the information you will also document.
And do I need to send this to any authority?
No, only if you're from Germany, you may need a data protection officer. Then this has to be announced, and the announcement also if there's a data breach. But not your documentation. But if the regulator asks, you have to provide it. And if people ask not for your documentation but for right to access, then you should answer within 1 month.
Thanks.
And look at our website and the others.
So thank you for a great presentation. To be honest, I don't have any questions myself. I'm just here to learn from questions of others. I'm going to pass the microphone to my next.
Then I have a question for no. Okay.
Well, that's very good because actually I have 2 questions. So where even? So the first thing was a bit related to the Schufa thing, because at the moment they're not required to disclose their model, and they're not required to say, okay, we're deciding based on the fact that you didn't pay something back 5 years ago and so on. But what if, for instance, let's say I'm a financial institution and I want to decide if I should give a credit to somebody or not, and if I want to predict if they're going to pay it back or not. But I might not even know myself based on what I'm exactly deciding, because I'm using a black box model. Does that even work under GDPR?
Yeah, that's one of the questions also with machine learning. Is it possible that the machines learn and nobody knows what is happening, and it cannot be documented, only that you can challenge the system and then there's output and it seems okay? But it's the prediction. And what about prediction? Can prediction be checked really, or doesn't? Probably it influences the future, and usually you cannot, there were a few cases here that you really try to have both solutions, but if it's one life, do you get the hip or not? Do you get this, can you become pilot or not? That will influence your life, obviously. It's not decided. Some people argue it's not possible to have machine learning according to the GDPR on personal data with automatic decisions. If it cannot be documented or not challenged. So it might be something that is running in parallel to some other process for some years. And then we'll see that it may be even perhaps better than the human beings. And then everybody will learn from that. But otherwise it may be creepy. Perhaps the first few years it may be okay. And some other day, Isaac Asimov's rules will, be violated.
Exactly, because prediction is for the future, but it would be very hard to tell if
you're
not discriminating based on something.
Yeah.
And the second thing was because you mentioned pseudonymization, and this, I feel, it's something that everybody does a bit different, and is there any, common... I don't know what to call them, not rules maybe, but body of research or directives or recommendations that you do on how this should be properly done, or is this even checked that this is properly done, or
No, it's really difficult to do it properly. And the pseudonymization definition is laid down in Article 4, number 5, and I wrote 30 pages on that or so, because it's so difficult. It's a very highly required thing that you must not get to the identity only with the pseudonymized data, only with additional information. We will, with ENISA, there will be something in October, I think, and with the public consultation on pseudonymization, among others, and data protection by default. And there is already something from the Article 29 Working Party on anonymization technologies 4 years ago. And this is quite good, although they could not use already the real definitions here. But it's still something we can learn from, which can be, of course, hash values with not a limited alphabet. So WhatsApp pseudonymization with telephone numbers is limited alphabet, does not work. It's, if there's aggregation inside, or if there are trustees, which really make sure that the data is not available.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're out of time.
Perhaps one last or so.
Question. You got a question?
Because I really have to run to the train then, for the train.
So you mentioned that there are still a bunch of things about the GDPR that are being worked out sort of in practice. And I'm wondering if there are any that are particular risks to sort of, to your understanding of the spirit of the GDPR. Are there still some things that might happen that might undermine the sort of the main idea?
It's really something happening right now. That what I told you, that it's the consent, contract, and legitimate interest. And the very big companies argue everything is legitimate interest. And then people try to say, oh, I have an overriding interest, so you must not use my data for that. And they say, oh, it's a complicated question, they say. It takes now not 1 month, but 3 months. And probably it will work like, then you may not get the service anymore. And this would really change the system as such. And 90% of those companies are residing in Ireland. And Ireland is what I know they are quite proud that those companies said, oh, we changed this bit and now it's better. And so, oh, yes, you did it on our behalf. That's very good. But it's not a real solution, and it's not about data minimization. It's not about real consent. It's not about information. So they are right now undermining that. These are the very big ones, and then we don't have any level playing field. And this is, I think, now the very risky thing. What is happening now, there will be this European Data Protection Board, and people meet there from all the data protection European countries, and they have to agree. And now, well, I won't call it fight, but in fact, it has to be the argumentation, what is now really meant by that, because some parts are very fuzzy. And then the rest probably, then it's really, if you can always say legitimate interest, then it's nice that you don't have to do anything anymore, only write it down. Or the other thing is contract, because if legitimate interests are accepted, as a rule, then the overriding interests also have to be accepted. That can be argued. But with contract, and if coupling is allowed as much as you want, as everybody wants, as the big companies want, then, and why should you be worse, get less than the big companies? If the big companies can argue this is part of our contract, then, and it's not challenged anymore, then this is the new reality. You sign, if you want something, you have to sign that. The bank is allowed to use that. But it's really an unusual system that there's a processor that is so mighty, that's so powerful. And it's not directly regulated by the state. It's because but it's different in all European states or the US. From what I know from Schufa, they're not the worst. Thank you so much for all your questions. And you're working on a very important topic, and all the data protection regulators, they have so little insight into what your questions are. We need to bridge that, and so I think we need to meet again. Thank you very much.